The divorce papers had just been laid on the table. Before the sting of betrayal could even settle in, my ex-husband coolly pulled out his smartphone. He firmly believed my father was bankrupt. He called my father and enunciated every word with force. "Mr. and Mrs. Prescott, you'd better come pick up your train wreck of a daughter. If she's still here in an hour, don't blame me for what happens." I didn't cry then. I just looked at the clock in silence, knowing that it wasn't I who would be thrown out of this house, but his entire arrogant family. And I knew that the performance my father had so meticulously prepared was about to reach its grand finale. 5 years ago, I, Camilla Prescott, had a lavish wedding with Griffin, a ceremony that was the envy of everyone we knew. I was the only daughter of Harrison Prescott, the chairman of the renowned Sterling Construction Group. He was just a sales manager at a small construction firm. Despite the vast difference in our family backgrounds, I loved him with a pure, guileless heart. On our wedding day, the greatest gift my parents gave us was this splendid, multi-million-dollar condo in the luxurious Upper East Side. My father said this home was my wedding gift, the foundation for us to build our lives together. The property was registered in both our names, a confirmation of the happiness we were meant to share. For the next few years, my life was a dream. Pierce was the perfect husband. I loved him deeply, and he always surprised me with romantic gestures. He was ambitious, too, climbing the ladder at his company with remarkable speed. My mother-in-law, Margo Griffin, was initially suspicious of me, thinking that as a tycoon's daughter, I wouldn't know how to handle household chores. However, seeing her son receive so much support from my family, she began to treat me well. I considered myself the happiest woman in the world. I was content with my life as a homemaker, being a pillar of support so my husband could focus on his career. I believed this happiness would last forever, but the storm was coming. A massive storm that would strip away every false pretense. It happened a few months ago, on a weekend evening, as the family was having a cheerful dinner. My phone rang. It was my father. I answered happily. "Hi, Dad. It's me. Have you guys eaten yet?" But what I heard wasn't his usual warm, energetic voice. It was a tired, hoarse whisper, filled with despair. "Camilla, listen to me carefully. You need to stay calm." My heart sank. "Dad, what is it? What's wrong?" I heard a deep sigh on the other end. "The company. Dad's company is bankrupt." Bankrupt. My ears were ringing. I couldn't believe it. How could Sterling Group, one of the leaders in the construction industry, go bankrupt? "Dad, you're kidding, right?" I stammered. "It's not a joke, honey." My father's voice sounded on the verge of tears. "I trusted the wrong people. I invested in a phantom project and lost everything. The banks are hounding me for the debts, and I think I'll have to give up the house, the properties, everything to pay them off. I'm sorry, sweetie. I can't do anything for you anymore." The smartphone slipped from my hand. Everything around me seemed to spin and crumble. Pierce and my mother-in-law stared at me, confused. "Camilla, what's wrong? What did your father say?" Pierce asked with concern. I couldn't answer. A lump formed in my throat. I could only shake my head as tears streamed down my cheeks. Pierce quickly picked up the phone from the floor. The call hadn't disconnected. He put it to his ear, and I watched his expression change from concern to shock, and then to horror. In a dead silence, he listened to the entire situation from my father. When the call ended, he placed the phone on the table. He didn't come to comfort me. He just sat there, stiff as a statue. The way he looked at me was completely alien, a look I had never seen before. It no longer held love or affection, but a cold distance and a ruthless calculation. Margo asked nervously, "Pierce, what's going on? Is your father-in-law okay?" Pierce glanced at his mother, then at me, and finally spoke. His voice was dry, without a shred of emotion. "Camilla's family is ruined, Mom." My mother-in-law looked surprised for a moment, but she quickly composed herself and said, "You two must stay strong and be a support for your father-in-law." Those words gave me a sliver of comfort. Dinner that night ended in silence. I cried all night, consumed with worry for my parents and anxiety about my future. But amidst the pain, I held one certainty. Pierce, my husband, would be by my side. We would overcome this together. I was wrong. I had no idea that the news of my family's bankruptcy was not just bad news for my husband and mother-in-law. It was a test that would reveal their true colors. And it was the beginning of a cunning conspiracy to strip me of the last thing I had left, this condo. The next morning, I woke up with swollen eyes, and the first harsh reality hit me. The change began to spread as clearly as an oil slick. The first to show her new attitude was my mother-in-law, Margo. Her previous kindness and courtesy were gone. The smile on her lips was replaced by a constant frown and a look of displeasure. At breakfast, I was too heartbroken to eat, only nibbling on a piece of toast. She remarked sarcastically, "Well, it seems the little princess of Sterling Group has gotten quite picky with her food lately. Don't like the food in this house anymore? Of course, you're used to banquets. Now that your parents are broke and you have no one to lean on, I guess life has lost its flavor, and you have no appetite." I froze. Her every word was like a dagger twisting in my wound. Pierce muttered, "Mom, what are you saying? Have I said anything untrue?" Margo snapped at her son. "I'm just telling it like it is. You used to go on and on about what her father did. Now that said father is in ruins, let's see if she can keep showing off." Then, she pursed her lips at me. "Let me tell you something. This isn't a house where you get to live rent-free. Your husband already has enough on his plate, working his tail off to support this family. And now it looks like he'll have to carry the weight of your family, too. From now on, you'd better act accordingly. Stop wasting money on designer clothes. You'd better get used to being the daughter-in-law of a poor family." I was stunned. Just the day before, she had praised my taste and style. Now, I had become the daughter-in-law of a poor family, a burden. Unable to stand the tense atmosphere, Pierce stood up abruptly. "I'm heading to work." He didn't say a single word to defend me, not one word of comfort. He simply chose to flee, leaving me alone to face his mother's cruelty. From that day on, my life in that house became a living hell. I was no longer Camilla or ma'am. I was treated like a servant. Margo started assigning me all sorts of household chores. "Camilla, clean the living room. It's so filthy I can't even look at it. Camilla, my clothes have been in the washing machine since this morning. Haven't you hung them up yet? How did you make this soup so salty? Are you trying to kill me?" All the work previously done by the housekeeper was now my responsibility. I tried to talk to Pierce. That night, I waited for him in the living room. "Pierce, we need to talk." He was clearly trying to avoid me. "I'm really tired right now. If you have something to say, let's talk tomorrow." "It has to be now," I said firmly. "Look at your mother's attitude lately. Don't you care how she's treating me?" Pierce sighed heavily. "You know my mom's personality. She's probably doing it because she's worried about me, worried I'm struggling. Besides, with what's happened to your family, it's understandable she'd be on edge. So just have a little patience. You're the daughter-in-law. Is it so hard to just humor her a little? Patience?" I couldn't believe my ears. "You're asking me to endure these insults? I'm your wife, not a maid in this house." "Enough," Pierce yelled. Perhaps it was stress from work, or perhaps he felt cornered. "Please, don't make things bigger than they are. I have enough problems already. What do you want me to do? Fight with my own mother and tear this family apart? If you're not going to think about me, at least think about this home." With that, he walked away again, leaving me alone with a suffocating mix of rage and sorrow. I realized it then. He would never take my side. Between his mother and me, he had chosen his mother. Or more accurately, he had chosen himself and his own comfort. The days passed in a blur of humiliation and loneliness. The worry for my parents and the cold treatment from my in-laws were consuming me. I lost a significant amount of weight, and my face was perpetually grim. I thought about divorce, but I couldn't bring myself to do it. I still loved him and harbored a faint hope that this was just a temporary hardship, that when it was all over, he would go back to being the husband I loved. But I didn't know that while I was clinging to patience and false hope, my husband and mother-in-law were plotting something far more cruel, a plan to seize my last and greatest asset. About a week after my family's catastrophe, one evening after another tense dinner, Pierce suddenly called me into his study. His attitude was strange that day. Instead of his usual coldness and disdain, he was surprisingly kind and considerate. "Camilla, come sit here," he said, patting the chair next to him. A bit surprised, I sat down cautiously. He poured me a glass of water and took my hand. "I know how hard the past few weeks have been on you. I'm sorry. I've been a fool for not comforting you. But don't worry. I've been thinking a lot, and no matter how difficult things get, I will never abandon you or your family." After so much coldness, his sweet words melted my wounded heart. The flame of hope flickered back to life. Maybe he really had realized his mistake, I thought. "You see," he continued in a sincere voice, "I've been meeting with partners and friends these past few days to find a way to help your father. but the debt is so large that my friend's help wouldn't be enough. He sighed deeply, a look of concern on his face. But I've thought of a solution. It might be a bit risky, but right now, it's the only way for your father to recover. What solution? I asked eagerly, filled with hope. Pierce looked at me with eyes full of love. Our home. This condo. It's in both our names. I've looked into it, and with the value of this property, we can secure a very large mortgage loan from the bank. We could get several $1,000,000. With that capital, your father could start over. He could rebuild his business. I froze. Mortgaging this condo? It was our biggest asset, our home. As if reading my hesitation, Pierce squeezed my hand tighter. I know what you're worried about. I know this was a wedding gift from your father. But think about the situation we're in. Your father is in trouble. How can we, as his children, just stand by and watch? Wealth can be lost and earned again, but family ties can't be bought with money. His words were noble and righteous. He was aiming straight for my weakest point, my filial love and devotion. Don't worry, he continued reassuringly. I've done all the calculations. We'll only take out a partial loan, just enough for your father to have capital for his business. With his ability and experience, he'll be able to pay back the principal and interest to the bank in a year or two. Our home will be safe. I'm doing this because I want to help you, because I want to ease your burden. He looked at me with sincerity, the look of a husband willing to give everything for his wife's family. Desperate with worry for my father, I was completely won over. I believed him. I thought he had finally come to his senses and returned to being the husband I loved. So, what do I need to do? I asked. I've already prepared all the papers, Pierce said, his face lighting up. Since you're also a co-owner, the bank needs both of our signatures. You also need to sign a power of attorney so I can handle all the bank procedures. Tomorrow, you just need to take a moment to sign right here. He pulled a thick stack of documents from his briefcase and placed it on the desk. With the thick stack of documents Pierce handed me, my mind was a whirlwind. On one hand, I was incredibly moved and grateful. When my family was on the brink of collapse, when I felt most alone and helpless, he wasn't a bystander but a husband, a pillar ready to weather the storm with me. His gesture seemed to erase all the bitterness and humiliation I had suffered from him and his mother over the past month. Maybe I had misjudged him, I thought. Maybe he had his own struggles due to pressure from his mother, but deep down, he was still the man who loved me, a responsible husband. His previous coldness was probably due to the immense shock and worry. What is it? Haven't you signed yet? Pierce's voice snapped me out of my thoughts. He looked at me with a hint of impatience, but quickly masked it with a warm smile. Is there something you're worried about? Just trust me. I would never do anything to harm you. Oh, no, it's not that, I said, feeling guilty for having doubted him. It's just, there are so many papers. I don't understand much about these procedures. I started flipping through the pages. They were filled with dense legal jargon and numbers: loan application and repayment plan, real estate mortgage agreement, power of attorney. Everything looked legitimate, just as he had said. I tried to read more closely, but my mind was a chaotic mess of worry for my parents and gratitude for my husband's gesture. I couldn't focus. You don't need to read everything in such detail, Pierce said in a tone that seemed urgent. They're all standard bank forms, they can't be changed. You just need to sign where I've marked. I have to submit these first thing in the morning. The appraiser is coming this afternoon. We need to move fast so your father can get the money. He brought my father into it again. His urgency, in my eyes, became a zeal to help his in-laws. He was in a hurry because he wanted to help my father as soon as possible. With that thought, the last shred of doubt in my mind vanished. I felt selfish and petty for questioning my husband's sincerity in this situation. Yes, okay. I'm sorry, I said, genuinely apologetic. I took the pen. He had carefully marked the places for my signature with yellow sticky notes. I no longer read the text carefully. I simply flipped to the marked pages and signed my name. My signature was clear and firm. I signed, placing all my faith and hope in this man. I had no idea. Among those indifferent papers, hidden away, was a fatal document waiting for my signature. I didn't see it. I signed my name to it, a signature that would seal my fate, turning me from the owner of this home into a destitute woman. The moment I finished signing, Pierce quickly gathered the stack of documents and checked the signatures once more. His face was beaming with joy. At that moment, I naively thought he was happy because he could help my family. Done, he said, hugging me tightly. Don't worry, everything will be fine, I promise you. Your parents won't suffer anymore. I hugged him back, shedding tears of emotion. In that moment, I believed I had my old husband back. I believed that even if our family crumbled, I had the strongest pillar in him. I didn't know I was living in a false happiness. I naively believed the storm had truly passed. I thought Pierce's love had overcome all material calculations. I didn't realize that was just the executioner's final kindness before the sentence was carried out, the calm before a storm that would destroy everything. And that storm arrived on a weekend evening. That night, I prepared a lavish dinner with all of Pierce's favorite dishes. I wanted to thank him for everything he had done for my family. When he came home from work, I ran happily to greet him, but what I received was not his usual warm smile. His face was as cold as ice, and the look he gave me was strange and contemptuous. Pierce, what's wrong? I asked, concerned. He didn't answer. He walked right past me and went straight to the living room. There, his mother, Margo, was already sitting, waiting for him with an impassive expression. Sit down, Pierce said in a dry voice. We need to talk. I had a bad feeling. My heart began to pound. I sat down cautiously on the sofa across from them. Pierce didn't beat around the bush. He pulled a folder from his briefcase and threw it on the coffee table with a sharp thud. Sign it. With trembling hands, I picked up the papers. The moment two words printed in bold jumped out at me, I felt the entire world explode. Divorce petition. I froze. My ears were ringing. Divorce? Why divorce? Pierce, you're joking, right? I stammered, unable to believe my eyes. Why? Why so suddenly? What? What did I do wrong? Pierce laughed. A laugh that, in hindsight, was unbelievably fake and terrifying. You haven't done anything wrong. I just don't love you anymore. Our lives are too different. I can't continue living with a woman who carries the weight of a family like yours. The weight of a family. Just a week ago, he had promised me we would bear it together, and now. Tears began to well up. No, it can't be. There must be a misunderstanding. Pierce, look at me. It's me. Camilla. But he didn't look at me. He stared coldly at the papers. Sign it. Don't waste my time. It was then that my mother-in-law spoke up. Her voice was no longer gentle but filled with scorn. Do you still not get it after everything he's told you? She said disdainfully. Look at you. Your parents are broke. You're not a rich girl anymore. Do you think my son is foolish enough to keep carrying a burden like you? He put up with you these past few years because of your family. Now that your family is finished, so is your relationship. It's that simple. Her every word was like a knife stabbing into my bleeding heart. So that was it. All the love he had professed was a calculation. He had only been with me for my title as the chairman's daughter. And now that the title was gone, he intended to discard me like a useless object. Scum! I screamed. You're human garbage. Who are you calling scum? She shrieked back. Be grateful my son put up with you for the last 5 years. Just sign it already and get out of my sight. I looked at Pierce with pleading eyes. Pierce, don't do this to me, please. We can fix whatever is wrong, together. But not divorce. But the man I had loved with my life responded coldly. It's too late, Camilla. My feelings for you died the day I found out your family was ruined. Either you sign, or we'll see each other in court. His words were like a hammer blow that shattered my last hope, my last illusion. I collapsed onto the floor, clutching the divorce papers and sobbing uncontrollably. I had been deceived in the most cruel and absolute way. The man I loved most turned out to be a demon, a con artist wearing a mask of love. He and his mother had put on a play together, a play to use me, exploit me, and finally, abandon me without mercy. I cried until my tears ran dry, but in the midst of that extreme pain, a cold anger began to boil inside me. It was my mistake to believe in love, but I would not let them continue to trample on me. I wiped my tears and shot to my feet. I grabbed the pen and signed my name on the divorce petition. A signature without hesitation. There. Signed. Fine. Let's get divorced. Pierce and his mother seemed a little surprised by my change in attitude, but I continued in a firm voice. This house was a wedding gift my father gave me. Even if we divorce, I'm not going anywhere. It's still my house. Hearing my words, Pierce and Margo looked at each other and burst out laughing, a laugh filled with contempt and pity. Your house? Pierce said, laughing until tears streamed down his face. Camilla, you're so naive it's pathetic. Do you really think any part of this house will be left for you after the divorce? He walked over, pulled another folder from his briefcase, and threw it in front of me. See for yourself. Whose signature is this? With trembling hands, I picked up the document and felt the world crumble once more. It was a deed of gift for the property, and below, my signature was clearly written. It was then that I realized the stack of papers I had signed, the trap I had walked into with my own 2 hands. You tricked me. I screamed, lunging at him like a wild animal, but he easily pushed me away, and I fell clumsily to the floor. Tricked you? You could say you were just too stupid, he said, looking down at me with the eyes of a victor. Who are you going to blame now, after signing a document with your own hand, gifting your share of the house to your husband? This house is now mine alone. You're not entitled to a single cent. I collapsed on the floor, completely broken. I had lost everything. My husband, my faith, and now, even my home. I had been cheated in the most brutal way imaginable. The days leading up to the court date were hell. I was living in my own home, but I was treated like a prisoner, a nuisance to be disposed of as quickly as possible. Pierce and his mother no longer bothered with pretenses. They openly criticized and insulted me, deliberately talking loudly about how they would redecorate the condo after the freeloader was gone, or how they'd invite friends over to celebrate being rid of the burden. Every word was like 1,000 needles piercing my bleeding heart. I contacted several law firms for help, but when I told them my story and admitted that I had signed the deed of gift with my own hand, they all shook their heads helplessly. It will be difficult, an older lawyer told me. The document is clear and properly notarized. If you don't have concrete evidence of fraud or coercion, like an audio or video recording, the chances of overturning this are practically zero. The court only rules on evidence. Evidence. Where was I supposed to get evidence? Everything had happened between Pierce and me, and his sweet words and kind gestures were all an act of performance that had left no trace. I was at a dead end. I felt so stupid, so naive. How could I have fallen for such a crude trap? How could I have signed without reading the documents carefully? I blamed and reproached myself, but the self-reproach soon turned to anger. The fault wasn't mine, it was theirs. It was the fault of these people who had used my love and trust to weave such a vile plot. I decided to go to court, even if I lost. I had to stand before the law and tell the whole truth in my own voice. Even if no one believed me, I had to show the world their true faces. The court date was set. I went to the courthouse alone, without a lawyer or family. I hadn't dared to tell my parents the truth. They were already suffering enough with the bankruptcy. I didn't want to worry them further. I lied, telling them Pierce and I were having a small conflict and needed time to resolve it. When I entered the courtroom, I saw Pierce and his mother sitting there. They weren't alone. Beside them sat a lawyer who looked impeccable and very self-assured. Seeing me alone, they gave me looks of even greater contempt and smugness. They were certain of their victory. The trial was swift. For me, it was almost torture. Pierce's lawyer presented his arguments clearly and eloquently. He stated that our marriage had broken down due to insurmountable conflicts and differences in background and thinking. And then, with a triumphant air, he presented his winning card. The deed of gift for the house, bearing my signature. Your Honor, he said with feigned solemnity, regarding the assets, we have no dispute. In consideration of their marital affection and in gratitude for the care my client's family provided her during a difficult time, my client's wife, Mrs. Camilla Prescott, decided to gift her entire share of the condo to her husband, Mr. Pierce Griffin. All procedures are legal and have been duly notarized. A suffocating rage filled me. His words twisted the truth shamelessly. Gratitude? Care? They had turned me from a victim of a scam into a sympathetic wife. That's not true. I shouted, jumping to my feet, unable to contain myself any longer. It's all a lie. They tricked me. I knew nothing about that document. He deceived me. He told me they were papers for a bank loan to help my father. But the judge only looked at me with an expression of pity. Please calm down, Mrs. Prescott. The signature on the document is yours, is it not? I looked at the signature projected on the screen. It was, without a doubt, my signature. I couldn't deny it. But I didn't know the contents, I sobbed. They tricked me. Please, believe me, Your Honor. Do you have any proof of fraud or coercion? Pierce's lawyer retorted. A challenging question, a sharp blade twisting in my helplessness. Proof. Where was I going to get proof? It had all happened between him and me, and his sweet words had vanished like smoke, leaving no trace. I was defenseless, able to do nothing but stand there crying and repeating desperately. He tricked me. This is unjust. Please believe me. But my tears were worthless against the black and white paper. Pierce and his mother sat there, watching my suffering. There wasn't a hint of compassion in their eyes, only the elation of the victor. Finally, the hearing ended. The judge struck the gavel. The sharp sound was like the final nail in the coffin of my marriage and my faith. After examining the evidence presented, he read the verdict in a flat voice. This court recognizes that the contract of gift for the real property between Mrs. Camilla Prescott and Mr. Pierce Griffin is a fully legal, confirmed, and notarized contract. Mrs. Prescott's side has not presented any evidence of fraud or coercion. Therefore, the court grants Mr. Pierce Griffin's petition for divorce. Regarding the assets, it is confirmed that the condo at the aforementioned address is the sole property of Mr. Pierce Griffin. I fell back into my chair. My ears were ringing, and everything went dark. I had lost. I had lost spectacularly. I had lost to my naivety and my blind faith. The law was not on my side. I couldn't go to my parents' house. I didn't want them to see me in this miserable state. I had nowhere else to go. Aimlessly, I took a cab back to that condo, what was once my home, now the battlefield where I had been defeated. When I arrived, Pierce and his mother had just gotten back as well. But amid the pain and desperation, a feeling of anger and rebellion began to grow. No, I couldn't give up like this. That house was my house. I wasn't going anywhere. I wouldn't let them take everything from me so easily. I would stay and fight to the end. Even if I was alone, even if I had to use the most extreme methods. As I walked in, Margo pursed her lips and said sarcastically, "Why did you crawl back here? The judge has already made his ruling. This isn't your house anymore. Didn't you hear? Are you deaf? Get out of here, you make me sick." I walked into the house without a word and went straight up to my room. I wasn't leaving. This house was given to me by my parents. It might not be mine on paper anymore, but morally, I was still the owner. As I refused to leave, Pierce came over and blocked my path. "What are you doing? Are you planning to barricade yourself in here?" "Yes," I said, lifting my head and looking him straight in the eye. For the first time, I met his gaze with defiance. "This house belongs to my parents. It's the fruit of their blood, sweat, and tears. I'm not going anywhere. If I have to die, I'll die in this house. I won't let scammers like you have it so easily." "You, who are you calling a scammer?" Margo shrieked, rushing from behind and pointing a finger in my face. "If the shoe fits, wear it," I replied, my voice as cold as ice. My stubborn and defiant attitude enraged them, but since they had just come from court, they didn't dare do anything drastic. "Fine," Pierce sneered. "If you want to stay, then stay. But don't expect to live comfortably. Let's see how long you can last." It was the third day I had held out in my room. His patience had likely run out, because Pierce no longer seemed interested in playing games. He pounded on my door. "Camilla, get out here now." I didn't answer. "You're not coming out? You want me to break down the door?" I knew that with his temperament, he was perfectly capable of it. I took a deep breath and opened the door. He stood there with his arms crossed, looking down at me arrogantly. "You still haven't left? You really plan to stay here so shamelessly? Let me tell you something, Camilla. Your ruined family is no match for ours. You'd better leave on your own terms. Don't force me to hurt you." I just stared at him in silence. My silence seemed to infuriate him even more. "Fine. You asked for it." He pulled out his smartphone and dialed the number. A number I would never forget. My father's number. "Hello, am I speaking with my father-in-law?" he said into the phone. His tone was filled with contempt and defiance. He purposely put it on speaker so that both I and his mother, who was nearby, could hear. "It's Pierce. In-laws, I'm calling with some good news. Your darling daughter. As of today, she's no longer my wife. We just got divorced." There was silence on the other end. I could imagine my father's shock and pain. My heart clenched, but Pierce didn't stop. He laughed cruelly. "Oh, but I'm not just calling to share the news. Sorry to bother you, but could you come and pick up your train wreck of a daughter? She's holed up in my house and has no intention of leaving. Says she'd rather die here. What an education you've given her. You even taught her how to be a freeloader in someone else's house." Clang. I heard something shatter on the other end of the line. It was probably the teacup my father always had in his hand. What did you just say? My father's voice trembled with rage. Come and get her. Pierce roared like a wild beast. Our house isn't a charity to take in the daughter of a bankrupt old man like you. I'm giving you 1 hour. If she's still here in an hour, don't blame me if I have someone drag her out onto the street. Goodbye. He hung up and tossed the phone onto the table. He turned to me with a triumphant smirk. I stood there, tears streaming down my cheeks, but this time they were not tears of helplessness. They were tears of profound rage. He had not only insulted me, but also my parents, the people I love most in this world. He had crossed my final line. Come pick up your problematic daughter. Pierce's words echoed in my head, sharp as 1,000 shards of glass, tearing my heart apart. He had not only insulted me but had also trampled on the last shred of pride my family and I had left. In that instant, everything inside me shattered. Faith, love, even the last ounce of strength I had, it all vanished like smoke. I stood in the middle of the luxurious living room, sobbing. Rage, pain, and a suffocating helplessness washed over me. I was wrong. Resisting in this house was pointless. I thought staying was a fight for justice, for the gift my parents had given me. But no, it only gave them more ammunition to hurt my loved ones. How devastated my father must have been to hear those words. He had lost his life's work, and now he had to endure unspeakable insults from his ex-son-in-law. I felt so useless, such a terrible daughter. Pierce and his mother were still there, watching me with crossed arms and triumphant expressions, waiting for me to completely break down, to pack my bags and leave in humiliation. Why aren't you leaving yet? Pierce sneered. Or are you waiting for your dad to actually show up? That wouldn't be so bad. He could see with his own eyes how his precious daughter gets thrown out onto the street. Maybe then he'll regret not raising her better. Every word was torture. In my desperation, as if on reflex, I grabbed my smartphone and with trembling hands, dialed my father. I don't know why I called. Maybe I just wanted to hear his voice, to find a sliver of comfort, or to apologize for putting him through this humiliation. He answered on the first ring. Dad, it's... My voice broke, unable to form words. Camilla, don't cry. My father's voice on the other end showed none of the anger or distress I expected. Instead, it was incredibly calm and steady, with a strange strength. Dad knows everything. I froze. Dad, don't worry. He cut me off. I recorded everything that scumbag said. My daughter, you've suffered a lot. You've done very well. You've been very brave. His voice was no longer that of a tired, bankrupt man. It was deep and authoritative, as if a long silent lion had finally awakened. Now, listen to me carefully. His voice was firm, leaving no room for argument. Don't go anywhere. Stay in that house. Do not take one step out that door. No matter what they say or do. If you have to, lock your bedroom door. Understand? Yes. Yes. I understand, I replied, still confused. Good. Stay put. I'll be there in 30 minutes. But what are you going to do? They're here, and they're very aggressive. They'll insult you. Trust your father. That was all he said. 3 words, but they carried the weight of a ton. Instantly, all my confusion vanished, replaced by absolute faith. Then he hung up. My father was coming in 30 minutes. What did he plan to do? How could a ruined man face such arrogant people? Would he come to beg them for mercy? No, that couldn't be it. My father's voice was not that of a man coming to plead, it was the voice of a man coming to deliver justice. Seeing my dazed expression after the call, Pierce and his mother gloated even more. What? Did you go tattling to your daddy? Pierce mocked. Let's see what that bankrupt old man can do when he gets here. Is he going to come and kneel down to apologize for his daughter? That would be a sight to see. Don't waste your breath on her, Margo said, heading to the kitchen dismissively. Let him come. Let him come and take this nuisance away. What a relief. I'll have a cup of tea while I enjoy the show. Pierce slumped onto the sofa, crossed his legs, and turned on a sports channel, completely ignoring me. They were savoring their last moments of arrogance, unaware that a tsunami was about to crash down and wash away all their hubris and filthy schemes. I said nothing. I walked silently up to my bedroom and, as my father had instructed, locked the door. I didn't pack. I simply went to the window, parted the curtain slightly, and looked down at the street. I waited. For 30 minutes, the 30 minutes that would decide the fate of my family, and theirs. I was no longer afraid. Instead, I felt a strange excitement, as if I was about to witness something extraordinary. Exactly 30 minutes later, I heard a distant rumble. The sound of car engines grew louder and louder until they stopped right in front of our building. I held my breath and peered out. A convoy of vehicles had appeared. It wasn't the old taxi or beat-up car Pierce and his mother might have imagined. Leading the procession was a gleaming black Rolls-Royce Phantom, a car I could never mistake, the one my father used for meetings with his most important partners. The late afternoon sun glinted off its luxurious black paint. Following it were two black Mercedes-Benz S-Class sedans and, bringing up the rear, a large black SUV of the type used for security details. When the convoy stopped, it took up the entire street, creating an imposing and authoritative scene. Downstairs, Pierce and his mother heard the noise and came out to the balcony. When they saw the convoy, the smirks on their faces froze. They looked at each other in bewilderment, probably thinking some big shot had taken a wrong turn. The door of the Rolls-Royce opened, and a man in a black suit and sunglasses stepped out. It was Alonso, my father's most trusted head of security. He courteously walked around the car to open the rear door, and then, my father emerged. He was wearing a perfectly tailored Tom Ford suit, and on his wrist gleamed the limited edition Patek Philippe watch I had given him for his last birthday. His hair was impeccably styled, his shoes polished to a mirror shine. He looked nothing like a ruined man drowning in debt. He was majestic and imposing, like an emperor returning to his kingdom. From the other cars emerged our family's lawyer, Leland Thorne, and a team of nearly a dozen bodyguards, all tall and powerfully built, in black uniforms that gave them a highly professional air. From my bedroom window, I watched the scene, speechless with shock. Then, I burst into tears. But this time, they were tears of happiness and overwhelming emotion. Dad. My father wasn't bankrupt. It had all been an act. Downstairs, Pierce and his mother were also on the balcony, stunned. The color drained from their faces, shifting from arrogance to bewilderment, and then to extreme panic. They weren't fools. They were beginning to realize they had fallen into a trap. The security team quickly fanned out, securing the perimeter of the building's entrance. My father and Mr. Thorne walked calmly into the courtyard through the main gate, which Pierce had forgotten to lock. I quickly unlocked my bedroom door, wiped my tears, and hurried downstairs. When I reached the bottom, my father and Mr. Thorne had just entered the living room. Dad! I cried out, overwhelmed. My father turned to me, his stern gaze softening for an instant. He walked over, opened his arms, and pulled me into a tight embrace. My daughter, he said, patting my trembling back. I'm sorry for putting you through this. It's all over now. That hug, so firm and warm, washed away all the humiliation and pain I had endured. I felt safe. Just then, Pierce and Margo came stumbling down the stairs. They stood frozen at the landing, staring at the scene. Their faces were as white as paper, their legs trembling. Mr. Prescott, Pierce stammered, his voice stripped of all arrogance, filled only with terror. How did you get here? Your company. My father released me and turned to face them. His gentle expression vanished, replaced by a gaze as cold and sharp as a razor, a look that seemed to pierce right through the soul. My company? He scoffed, a laugh full of sarcasm. Thank you for your concern. It's doing very well. In fact, we just closed a major deal in Dubai this morning. What? What are you saying? Margo shrieked in disbelief. Impossible. That's a lie. You're bankrupt. You said so yourself. Yes, I did say that, my father admitted calmly. But it wasn't bad news. It was a test. A test to see the true nature of people's hearts. A test? I gasped. Pierce and Margo were equally horrified. A test? Margo's voice was laced with disbelief. It seemed she still couldn't accept that she had been tricked. My father, as if she wasn't even worth a response, sat down calmly on the sofa in the very spot where, just minutes ago, Pierce had sat arrogantly with his legs crossed. He gestured for me to sit beside him. His relaxed demeanor was that of a king in his own palace. Mr. Thorne wasted no time. He walked to the glass coffee table and opened his briefcase. Mr. Griffin, Mrs. Griffin, he said, his voice polite but devoid of emotion. I believe it's time for you to learn the whole truth. Mr. Thorne took out a dark blue-bound folder and placed it on the table. This is the original deed of gift for the property, drafted on the wedding day of Mr. Pierce Griffin and Miss Camilla Prescott, 5 years ago. Mr. Harrison Prescott, as the bride's father, gifted this condo, valued at several $1 million, as a marital asset. Yes, so what? Margo retorted, the veins in her neck bulging. She seemed to have regained some courage. Camilla signed a document gifting her entire share to my son. This house now belongs exclusively to Pierce. The court has ruled on it. We have a clear document. How dare you try to overturn it, she said confidently, clinging to her legal victory. Mr. Thorne smiled a smile of pity and sarcasm. Ma'am, let's not get ahead of ourselves. That court victory is likely only temporary. Would you mind carefully reading the final clause of this original deed? Article 9, Section 3. He pointed to a line printed in very small font at the bottom of the last page, a place easily overlooked. Pierce and Margo leaned forward, squinting to read. Their confident faces turned from red to white, then to a pale blue. Without giving them time to process, Mr. Thorne read it aloud, his voice clear and resonant, like a judge delivering a sentence. Special Clause 9.3, this deed of gift, and all related real estate titles, shall have full legal validity only as long as the recipients, Pierce Griffin and Camilla Prescott, maintain a legally valid marital relationship. In the event the marital relationship is terminated for any reason, including divorce or the death of one party, this deed shall automatically become null and void. Any subsequent transfer, gift, sale, mortgage, or other contract or document made regarding this property without the written and notarized consent of the original donor, Harrison Prescott, shall be considered invalid. The property shall automatically revert to the ownership of the Sterling Construction Group LLC. Null. Null and void? Margo stammered, her voice breaking. She staggered and had to grab her son's arm to keep from falling. That's correct, ma'am, Mr. Thorne said, his voice like ice. To put it simply, that deed of gift Mr. Griffin has in his possession, the one you treasure so much, automatically became worthless paper the moment he and Miss Camilla officially divorced. It has no legal value whatsoever. No. Impossible. Pierce shouted, completely losing his composure. This is a trap. You set us up. Who has ever heard of such an absurd clause? What law allows this? Mr. Thorne smiled again. Mr. Griffin, I see you are not well versed in the law. This is a perfectly legal provision known as a conditional gift. When you and Miss Camilla signed this deed, you accepted that condition. You cannot claim you didn't know. Furthermore, at the time, your own lawyer reviewed this contract and confirmed there were no legal issues. Pierce was dumbfounded. He remembered signing the deed, so ecstatic about receiving such a massive gift from his father-in-law that he paid no attention to the minor clauses. He had walked right into a brilliantly calculated legal trap. What about the court's ruling? Margo asked, trying to grasp at her last hope. The court ruled that this house belonged to my son. The trial court's ruling was based on the evidence presented at that time, Mr. Thorne explained calmly. We did not present this original deed then. Why? Because we wanted to see just how far your performance would go. Now, we have sufficient evidence of Mr. Griffin's fraud, along with this original deed. We will appeal, and I guarantee you, 100%, that the appellate court's ruling will be entirely different. Mr. Griffin will not only fail to keep the house, but he could also face charges of fraud and misappropriation of property. Pierce and Margo completely fell apart. They looked at each other, then at my father, their faces filled with horror. They had fallen into a trap one set 5 years ago and sprung at the perfect moment. They had been too arrogant. They had underestimated us. And now, they had to taste the bitterest of defeats. When Mr. Thorne finished his explanation, a heavy silence fell over the room. Pierce and Margo sank onto the sofa, their eyes vacant, every ounce of their arrogance gone. My father, who had watched everything in silence, finally stood up. His expression was not that of a victor, it was one of disappointment and profound sadness. Pierce, he began, his voice deep and authoritative. I once trusted you. I thought you were an ambitious, talented young man who, above all, sincerely loved my daughter. I didn't hesitate to give you my most cherished child in marriage and provide you with a great fortune as a foundation. I hoped you would build a happy family with Camilla, and later, run this business with me. He shook his head, disappointed. After a few years of observation, if I saw that you had truly matured, I planned to entrust you with a major part of the group, a position you probably never even dreamed of. And this bankruptcy charade was my final test for you. Hearing that, not just Pierce and Margo, but I too, was stunned. The final test. My father looked at me apologetically. Camilla, I'm sorry I didn't tell you, but I had to. I had to know if the man you chose, the man I was going to entrust with my daughter's future and my entire business, was truly reliable. He turned his gaze back to Pierce. I wanted to see your true nature when my daughter was no longer a rich man's child, when her family had collapsed, when she became a burden. I wanted to see if, as you vowed on your wedding day, you would stand by her side through hardship, or if. My father didn't finish the sentence, but we all understood. I gave you a chance, his voice grew firm. A chance to prove yourself as a man, as a husband. But you have disappointed me immensely. You not only showed your greed and treachery, but you abandoned your wife in her moment of greatest pain, even colluding with your mother to snatch away her last asset. You don't deserve to be my daughter's husband. You don't deserve to inherit anything from me. My father's words were the final judgment, slamming shut all doors to Pierce's future. It was then that he realized what he had lost. Not just a condo, but an immense fortune, a giant business, and a brilliant future. He had thrown it all away for his own greed and short-sightedness. He slowly looked up at my father and me. Then, he crawled on his knees before my father. Sir, I'm sorry. I was wrong. Tears of belated regret streamed down his face. It was like I was possessed. Greed blinded me. Please forgive me just this once. I promise, I'll change. I'll treat Camilla well. Please, don't kick us out. Seeing her son, Margo rushed over to kneel beside him. It's true, father-in-law, she wailed miserably. It's all my fault. I was the one who, in my old age and foolishness, incited my son. Please, think of the young couple, of the 5 years they lived as husband and wife, and forgive us this one time. We're truly sorry. Another tearful performance began, but this time, it had no effect. My father just looked at them coldly. Forgiveness? If the person who came here today wasn't me, but a truly bankrupt old man, would you have said these words? Or would you have insulted that old man to his face and thrown his daughter out onto the street without mercy? Faced with my father's question, they were speechless. I gave you the chance, but you threw it away with your own hands, my father said to Pierce. There is nothing more to discuss. Pierce remained kneeling on the cold marble floor, but he was no longer crying or begging. He lifted his head and looked at us. His eyes held no remorse, only the emptiness of someone who has lost everything. He began to mumble as if he'd lost his mind. A test. It was a test. The bankruptcy was fake. He let out a dry, crazed laugh. Ha ha ha. So that was it. It was all a play to test my heart. You treated me like a lab rat, and now you're enjoying the show of me falling into your trap. We didn't see you as a rat, my father said, his voice frigid. You turned yourself into one, chasing the bait in front of you without seeing the trap hanging over your head. After a moment of shock, Margo snapped back to reality, her mind twisted into a demented fury. She jumped to her feet and pointed at my father's face, her mask of civility completely gone, leaving only shameless greed. You're a real piece of work, Harrison Prescott, she screamed. Because you have money and power, you can do whatever you want. Playing games, testing people with your daughter and your fortune. Do you think we're your toys? Yes, my son was wrong. His mistake was not being as ruthless and cruel as you. She turned to her son. Pierce, get up. What are you doing sitting there? You did nothing wrong. Your only mistake was being too good and trusting people. After living with this old man's daughter for 5 years, treating her like a princess, now his whole family gangs up to throw you out. Are you still going to kneel before these people? I couldn't believe my ears. Even now, she could twist the truth with such audacity. In her version, her son had become the victim, and we were the cruel tormentors. Mrs. Griffin, Mr. Thorne interjected, his voice still calm but sharp. I suggest you watch your words. Who served whom and who was in the wrong is something you know better than anyone. And I remind you once more that legally, this condo was never your son's property. Shut up. Margo shrieked, now lashing out at the lawyer. You're nothing but a hired gun for that old man. The papers say Camilla gifted the house to my son. The court ruled on it. You think you can overturn that? She was desperately clinging to the erroneous trial court, ruling like a drowning person to a piece of driftwood. My father just shook his head slightly, his face showing clear disappointment. He seemed unwilling to argue further with a woman who had lost her reason. But Pierce appeared to be incited by his mother's words. His desperation turned to anger. He stood up and stared at my father, his eyes no longer filled with fear, but with a crazed defiance. She's right, he said, his voice hoarse. You're right. I failed your test. But don't celebrate too soon. The court ruled that this house is mine. Even with your strange clause, the court's ruling still stands. You want to overturn it? It won't be easy. We'll see you in appeals court. Let's see if your money can beat the plain logic of black and white. He was even threatening us. He believed that with the ruling he already had in hand, he still had a chance. Greed had completely blinded him. He had no idea what he was up against. I looked at the man before me, the man I once loved. My heart was filled only with bitterness. He felt not the slightest remorse. He had chosen to fight to the very end. My father looked from Pierce to Margo. He wasn't angry at all. He just smiled coldly. Fine. If you wish, he said, turning to the lawyer. Mr. Thorne. I don't think we'll need to wait for the appeals court. Show them the final gift I've prepared. The final gift? I was surprised. 2. Mr. Thorne nodded and opened his briefcase again. But this time, what he took out wasn't a folder, but a tablet. He played a video, set it on the table, and turned the screen towards Pierce and his mother. On the screen was footage from a hidden camera, installed in the private room of a high-end restaurant. And the star of the video was none other than Pierce. He was talking to an unfamiliar man. Pierce's voice was crystal clear. Don't worry. If you handle the matter in court properly, if you can get the ruling in my favor, as soon as I have the condo in my hands, I'll sell it immediately. We'll split the proceeds as agreed, 60 to 40. 60 for me, 40 for you. The other man laughed. Are you sure? I hear your father-in-law is no small fry. That fossil is nothing but a bankrupt old man now, Pierce sneered. And his daughter is so stupid, she does whatever I say. I have it all under control. When the video ended, the room was plunged into silence again, but this time it was a dead, suffocating silence. Margo stared at her son, her eyes wide with disbelief. It turned out her son had not only deceived his wife but had also dared to make deals with a court official, attempting to buy justice with money. And Pierce. Not a drop of blood was left in his face. He stared at the tablet, trembling from head to toe. How did you get this? He stammered. Did you think I don't have the same connections you do? My father said, his voice glacial. The man you met with was a setup that I arranged myself. I just wanted to see how far you would go. And you did not disappoint. The extreme shock caused Pierce to completely break down. He had not only failed, but his dirtiest conspiracy had been fully exposed. He had no escape. Your actions, Mr. Thorne said, his voice firm, as if reading an indictment, not only constitute fraud and misappropriation of property, but also show evidence of the crime of bribery, a felony offense. With this video and the testimony of the man who posed as an official, how many years in prison do you think you'll get, Mr. Griffin? Pierce crumpled to the floor, covering his face with his hands. He didn't even have the courage to look up. He had lost all will to resist, and the fear of prison had completely consumed his mind. After the terrible shock, Margo no longer dared to scream. She looked at her son, then at my father, her eyes filled with terror and despair. It was then she realized they had walked into the lion's den. She stumbled over and knelt before my father, all her pride and arrogance gone, leaving only the misery of a beggar pleading for mercy. Sir. Mr. Prescott, please. I'm begging you. She sobbed, her voice broken. It's all my fault. I, in my foolishness, incited my son. Please forgive us this one time. He's my only son. If he goes to prison, I won't be able to live. Please. Please have mercy. My father just looked at her coldly. Mercy, Mrs. Griffin? When your son deceived my daughter, did you think of that word? When you and your son were gloating after seizing her assets, did you think a day like this would come? And when your son mercilessly insulted me, calling me a bankrupt old man, did you think you would have to beg that same old man? Each of my father's questions was a dagger in her heart. She bowed her head lower, unable to answer. Dad, I called out softly. A part of me felt uneasy. My father turned to me, his gaze softening. Camilla, don't go soft. If you don't kill the snake, it will come back to bite you one day. This time, we have to pull it out by the roots. With that, he didn't look at the mother and son again. He motioned to Mr. Thorne. Mr. Thorne nodded and took another document from his briefcase. Mr. Griffin, Mrs. Griffin, he said. Mr. Prescott, after much consideration, has decided to offer you one last way out. At the words way out, both Pierce and Margo looked up, a spark of hope in their eyes. We will not press criminal charges for Mr. Griffin's bribery attempt. On one condition, Mr. Thorne said, placing the document on the table. Sign this affidavit. The content is simple. You both voluntarily waive all rights to appeal the court's judgment and concurrently acknowledge that this condo is the property of the Sterling Group. Furthermore, you pledge to never again appear in Camilla Prescott's life, nor to contact or interfere with her in any way. He paused, then added in a frigid tone. If you agree to sign, we will act as if this never happened. But if you don't, that video will be sent immediately to the district attorney's office. It wasn't a choice, it was an ultimatum. Sign and lose the house in exchange for freedom, or don't sign and go to prison. Pierce didn't have to think. He hastily grabbed the pen and, with a trembling hand, signed his name. Margo also stumbled to her feet and, following her son, signed with a shaky hand. When they finished, Mr. Thorne carefully put the affidavit back in his briefcase. Good, my father said. Now for the final step. He stood up, walked to the door, and motioned to the security team waiting outside. Come in. A dozen bodyguards in black uniforms filed in and formed 2 rows. Their presence made the air in the room heavy. Mr. Thorne, my father said, read them the rest of the ultimatum. The lawyer nodded. At the request of the legal owner of this condo, Mrs. Margo Griffin and her son, Mr. Pierce Griffin, are required to vacate this property within 1 hour. You may only take your essential personal belongings. All assets and furniture in the house are the property of the Sterling Group. My father addressed the head of security. Alonzo, have your men assist Mrs. Griffin and Mr. Griffin in packing. Remember, only personal effects, clothes, shoes, things like that. The rest stays. If they are not gone in 1 hour, kindly escort them out. Understood, sir. And so began the most humiliating eviction. Under Alonzo's direction, the security team split into 2 groups. One group escorted Pierce and his mother upstairs, while the other brought in large boxes and began packing. They moved with professional speed. Clothes from Pierce's and Margo's closets were pulled out and thrown into boxes. Shoes, handbags, cosmetics all met the same fate, without the slightest respect or compassion. Margo watched as her precious luxury items were treated like trash, her face pale. She tried to intervene, but 2 bodyguards blocked her path with icy stares. Sorry, ma'am. Mr. Prescott's orders. Pierce just stood in a corner as if rooted to the spot, with no strength left to resist. This eviction took place before my eyes, and those of curious neighbors peeking out their doors. The rumor that the Griffins were being thrown out by thugs spread like wildfire. Exactly 1 hour later, all of Pierce's and Margo's personal belongings were packed into a few boxes. Mr. Griffin, Mrs. Griffin, your time is up, Mr. Thorne said. Please leave. Carrying a few boxes, Pierce and Margo walked miserably out the door. As he passed me, Pierce paused for a moment, looked up, and gave me one last look. His eyes held regret, pain, and a faint hint of resentment. Without a word, I coldly turned my head away. They walked out the grand entrance under the curious stares and whispers of the neighbors. The heavy iron gate slowly closed behind them, bringing the darkest chapter of my life to an end. After Pierce and his mother were expelled, the spacious condo fell strangely silent. But it wasn't peaceful, it was a cold emptiness. The expensive perfume Margo wore, the loud sound of Pierce's TV, it was all gone. In the living room, amidst the remnants of their hasty departure, only my father and I remained. My father walked over and placed a hand on my shoulder. It's all over, sweetheart. I nodded, but I couldn't stop the tears from flowing. I wasn't crying out of pity for them, but for myself. I cried for the 5 years of my youth wasted, for a faith so brutally trampled. I was wrong, wasn't I, Dad? I sobbed. I was so stupid to believe in him. My father hugged me. No, you weren't wrong. You were just too good. The fault doesn't lie with you, but in the inscrutable hearts of people. Stop crying now. This will be a very expensive lesson for you. Be strong, my daughter. That night, I tossed and turned, unable to sleep. The image of Pierce, his desperate look as he was being thrown out, haunted me. I didn't feel satisfaction, only a vague sadness. If he hadn't been so greedy, if he had known how to cherish what he had, perhaps we wouldn't have come to this tragic end. In the following days, I stayed in the condo alone. My father, after resolving everything, had to fly back to Dubai for work. He said I needed a quiet space to think and heal my wounds. The news that Pierce Griffin's family had been kicked out of their condo spread quickly. Neighbors, friends, everyone was talking about it. The The truth about my father's fake bankruptcy and Pierce's scam also gradually came to light. People no longer saw me as a poor wife abandoned by her husband. Instead, they looked at me with respect and a slight awe. A few days later, I received a call from an old friend who worked at the same company as Pierce. "Camilla, did you hear the news?" Her voice was filled with excitement. "Your ex-husband, Pierce, has been fired." I was a little surprised. According to her, after the scandal, Pierce's reputation had been completely ruined. No company would trust a senior position to someone who had tried to swindle even his own in-laws. His company, under pressure from public opinion and likely with a little push from my father's connections, made the swift decision to let him go. "And that's not all," my friend continued. "I heard his mother, after the shock of being thrown out, was hospitalized and has now gone back to the countryside. They say she's in a really pitiful state. It's truly karma." I listened to her words but felt nothing. It was the price they had to pay for their greed and wickedness. I thought our story would end there, that we would each go our separate ways and never meet again. But I was wrong. About a week later, late at night as I was getting ready for bed, the doorbell rang. I looked at the intercom screen and my heart stopped. It was Pierce. He stood under the dim yellow light of the porch, looking absolutely wretched. His impeccable suit was replaced by a wrinkled shirt. His once neat hair was a mess. His face was gaunt, his beard unshaven, and his eyes were red and swollen as if he hadn't slept in days. He was no longer the arrogant, confident manager. He was just a failure, a nobody. I didn't want to open the door, but seeing his pathetic state, the last ounce of pity I had left stirred within me. I opened the door slightly. "What are you doing here?" I asked coldly. He didn't answer. He just looked at me, and then suddenly, he knelt down. "Camilla. I'm sorry," he wept. It was the heart-wrenching sob of a man who had lost everything. "I was wrong, Camilla. I was so wrong. Greed blinded me. I was a beast. Human garbage. I have no right to ask for your forgiveness. I just wanted to see you one last time to tell you I'm sorry." He remained kneeling, his forehead touching the ground, his broad shoulders shaking with sobs. I stared at him, my heart a whirlwind of emotions. I hated him for what he had done to me and my family. But seeing his miserable state, I couldn't help but feel a flicker of pity. After all, he was the man I once loved with all my heart. "Get up." My voice softened slightly. "It's all over now." "No," he shook his head. "It's not over until you tell me you forgive me." "Camilla, I know it's impossible, but please. Couldn't you give me one more chance? A chance to start over? I promise, I'll change. I'll find another job. I'll work hard and pay you back for everything. Couldn't we start over?" Start over? I froze. How could he say such a thing after everything that had happened? I smiled bitterly. "Start over, Pierce? Do you think everything can just go back to the way it was? Can a shattered mirror be pieced back together? My trust. You smashed it to pieces yourself." I looked him straight in the eye. "You know what hurt the most, Pierce? It wasn't you scamming me out of my home. It was you mercilessly insulting my father. When my father was at his lowest, you trampled on his pride. That is something I will never forget." He lowered his head, unable to argue. "You were wrong," I continued clearly. "But your biggest mistake wasn't greed. It was not knowing gratitude. You had everything. A wife who loved you, in-laws who supported you unconditionally, and a brilliant future. But you threw it all away. You discarded a gold mine for a piece of coal. That was your greatest foolishness." My words were like a dagger that plunged deep into his pride. He stopped crying and just sat there, stunned. "Go," my voice was tired. "We have nothing more to talk about. Don't ever come looking for me again. Live your life." With that, I slammed the door shut. I didn't look back once. I leaned against the door and began to cry again. But this time, they weren't tears of anger. They were the last tears to bid farewell to a love, to close a sad chapter of my life. The price of betrayal wasn't just material loss, it was the collapse of one's character, the remorse of conscience, and a loneliness that would haunt him for the rest of his life. Pierce paid far too high a price, and I, too, learned a lesson I would never forget. After that final encounter, Pierce never appeared before me again. I heard he had left the city and returned to his hometown with his mother, no job, no home, and a bleak future. They had to start from scratch, living amidst the scorn and criticism of relatives and neighbors. It was a bitter, but absolutely deserved, ending for what they had done. And me, after such a major blow, I didn't rush into a new relationship. I took time for myself. To heal my internal wounds. The spacious condo, which held both happiness and tragedy, became my serene space to regain my balance. I sold off half of the expensive, cold furniture, and replaced it with green plants and works of art. I turned it into a real home, my own space. My father, after teaching his treacherous son-in-law a lesson, no longer pressured me to join the management of the group. "Sweetie," he told me, "you've been through enough storms. Now, do what you truly love. Dad will always be here to support you." So I returned to my passion, architecture. But this time, I didn't work for a large corporation. I started my own small design studio, specializing in projects with a social contribution, building homes for the underprivileged, designing schools for children in rural areas, creating eco-friendly buildings. I wanted to use my talents not just to build impersonal structures, but to create value for society. The intense work and travel to new places helped me gradually forget the painful past. I met many people, saw different ways of life. I realized that as great as my pain was, it was small compared to the other misfortunes in the world. This made me stronger and more compassionate. A few years later, when my design studio was somewhat established, I happened to run into Rowan Shepherd, a friend from college. He was also an architect, and we shared the same ideals and passions. We talked a lot about work and life. In him, I found the empathy and understanding I never had with Pierce. Love came knocking on my door again, very gently and naturally, without any calculations. When I decided to remarry, my father asked me, "Are you sure this time?" I smiled and nodded. "Yes, Dad, I'm sure. He's not wealthy like Pierce, nor does he have a guaranteed brilliant future. But he has a sincere heart. And for me, now, that's more valuable than anything else." My second wedding was not ostentatious. We invited only family and our closest friends and had a small, warm celebration. Instead of an expensive wedding gown, I wore one I designed myself. It was simple, but it held all my love and hope for a normal, peaceful happiness.